So I've decided to film this video because I just went to watch the Barbie movie, and it is probably the wokest film of 2023. Let's talk about it. Guys, before we get to this video, please like, subscribe. I want as many people to find this channel. And yes, I had to come to you just to talk about the Barbie movie, which I took time to see it, and I sat through it and its entirety, and I think it's the wokest film of 2023. And before we get to the plot summary of this film, I want you guys to remember the original message of Barbie, that young girls and women can do anything they want.
Girls can do anything, right, Barbie? Right, Barbie.
She has thousands of different careers. She shows up in the world in 100 different ways, and she's encouraging young girls to keep that mindset, and always has encouraged that mindset within young women. By all reasonable markers, we would call the original Barbie a feminist, at least a first or second wave feminist. But there's been much debate about this film. Particular, Amy Schumer, if I pronounced her name correctly, said that the original take of the film was not going to be feminist enough. There's been much back and forth of the film.
I actually, when I got asked the other day, like, is Barbie a feminist? I was like, well, she's actually like the level up from that. Because if you look at Barbie Land at the beginning, like, the Barbies are on top and the Kens are kind of disregarded. So I was like, well, that's not equal.
No, right.
So
right.
whatever the opposite of misogynist is, actually, Barbie's like, so towards the end, when they balance things out, then it might be feminist.
Now let's talk about the plot. We start off in Barbie Land, where all of the Barbies are living and all of the Kens are, shall we say, existing. And Barbie, played by Mark Robbie, also lives every day perfectly. She wakes up and her hair is done, she gets dressed, her feet are perfectly stuck in that, high heel position. Every day is wonderful. All the Barbies love each other and they're so nice to each other. All the Kens are out doing their Ken things and they live in beautiful Babylon. But one day, Barbie falls into some of her crisis. She starts to think about death and despair, which is not to be heard in Babylon. And she recognizes that there's a problem. So she had to investigate. And she found out that whoever owns her in the real world is having these thoughts. And then in some way, through some portal between the Barbie land and the real world, is coming to affect her. And that's why she's thinking death, despair, and some of these horrific thoughts. And suddenly her feet move from that high heel position to flat-footed. So we know that there is a problem. But she's told that she needs to go out into the real world, find her owner, discover the problem, and somehow repair this portal between Barbie land and the real world. So that's where she sets off. And she goes, not alone, Ken goes with her into the real world. Now, upon entering the real world, not Andrew Tate's real world, many things are discovered. One, that men are all sexual predators, I guess, which you'll see in watching this film. But Ken and Barbie split and go in different directions. Barbie sets out to find who's her owner, which is played by America Ferrera. Pardon me if I didn't pronounce the name again. And Ken goes around to discover what the real world is actually like. And he realizes that the real world is a patriarchy that is run by men. And he's so excited about this idea because back in Barbie Land, he feels almost forgotten. People aren't looking at him. People aren't paying attention to him. He has a brilliant thought. He's going to bring the patriarchy to Barbie Land. So Ken splits from Barbie, goes out on his way, heads back to Barbie Land. Meanwhile, Barbie gets in her own crisis. She goes to the Mattel executive headquarters and gets into trouble there. But eventually, America Ferrera, who plays her owner and insufferable daughter, end up saving Barbie, and they decide we're going to go back to Barbie Land ourselves. So the three of them went back to Barbie Land, and when they arrived, they realized that Ken have turned Barbie Land into a patriarchy. Now the Kens are running Barbie Land. It's called the Kendom, and all the other Barbies that were living there before are now brainwashed with the idea of patriarchy. They're handing the men beers, they're acting some, they're doing whatever they ask, and it seems like they worship the men. Barbie, of course, was very upset about it. So they decide we need to fix Barbie Land. They end up deprogramming a lot of the Barbies through these radical speeches about feminism and how hard it is to be a woman, and how dumb and horrible men are. And they rise up again, beat the Kens against each other, and when the Kens are fighting, they restore Barbie Land to its glory. Now at the very end of this film, Barbie decides, I don't know who I am anymore, but I want to discover who I am. So she wants to go back into the real world. So that's how the movie ends. Barbie takes off the world Barbara and goes off into the real world to have an adventure. Now, as far as my review goes, I feel first it's important to talk about positive of the film because there were some positives. I think the writers did a great job.
And a Barbie movie would remain surface level, but I knew Greta was going to have a lot to say, and I knew she was going to kind of Trojan horse a lot of big issues within a very fun way.
It was fun, it was entertaining, it had a lot of emotions, and you know, Barbie is always Barbie. Whoever was responsible for that deserves a round of applause. The movie is truly a brilliant thing to behold. The costuming was also really fun and kind of brilliant. It felt like you were really there in Barbieland. I myself was not too entertained with the jokes or the comedic factors of this film, but I would say the entire theater, for the most part, was full, and everybody there was loving it, you know, applauding, cheering. There was a lot of energy, you know, at the end of the movie, which is fun. Now, let's really talk about what I perceive to be negative in this film. First of all, you might think that the Barbie movie is something that you should take children to watch. I would not recommend that. It's certainly not a film that I will show to my future children, whether they are boys or girls.
Is this a kids movie or is it not a kids movie?
This is such like a thing people say when they do press for a movie. They're like, it's for everyone. But it was literally crafted to be for everyone. Like this, Greta said from the beginning, like, this is a big party and everyone is invited.
The overall messaging of this film is not a healthy message for young people or really anybody. And you see some sexual scenes. Now let's talk about the spooky patriarchy. It's a massive through line throughout this entire film. In fact, the word patriarchy was unironically mentioned in this movie more times than I could count. The entire plot of this film is upon the belief that the real world is in fact a patriarchy, that men are constantly running and controlling things even if they're not that bright and they don't really have good character. There are multiple speeches, direct speeches in this film about how horrible it is to be a woman. And of course, they give us the message that the world should in fact be a matriarchy, like Babylon, where women run everything. Because you cannot possibly have a centralist mindset that men and women complement each other, have different strengths and weaknesses, and men and women should coexist in a world where they both rule. I found myself many times staring this film, looking at the women and thinking, do they think women are dumb? Because that's truly how they presented them. The women in this film were ditzy, pathetic, lacked agency, and were trying to spin the idea that maybe they lack agency. In fact, in one point, America Ferrari said, in quotes, "It is impossible to be a woman," in quotes. Think about that.
What was everyone's reaction to you saying that on set? And what was it like for you saying it?
Like, I think it really landed with the crew, too. Like, I had a lot of crew members, men and women, approach me, and they were like, really felt it.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
There's also a quote at the end of the film where one of the Barbies says, in the future, Kens will have as much power in Babyland as women have in the real world.
That's a joke. No, I get it, yeah.
And this is supposed to be a haha moment because women truly have no power in the real world and always stuck under the thumb of our oppressive patriarch women. Now let's move on from the women to the men in this film, who are largely playing Kens or the executives in the real world. There is not a single quality man in this entire movie. They are ditzy, they are feminine beyond belief, and they lack good character. And that's exactly what the movie wants you to think about real men. You get the men in the real world who are sexually harassing Barbie. One of them even assaults her as she steps into the real world of Los Angeles, California. You get to executives who are constantly belittling women while also being really unintelligent themselves. If this movie wants to leave you with any message, it is the message that men are terrible. We should hate them and we should live in a matriarchy. And they must mention the dynamic between men and women in this film. We all know that Barbie and Ken come together as a couple. For many of us, they were meant to be in love as perfect pair of woman and man. In this movie, none of the Barbies, none of them are really in love with Kens. In fact, the only point in this movie where Barbies actually show romantic affection towards their Kens is when they are brainwashed by the patriarchy. But guys, I think you get the gist. I can go on and on about this film and some of the different contradictions and some of the different messages I'll leave you with this. The film wants to let you know that it hates patriarchies, it hates men, it hates beauty standards, it hates capitalism, it hates Eurocentralism, and most of all, it hates Barbie and Mattel, the company responsible for the creation of Barbie, even though that's exactly what the film is meant to be about. As I said before, the audience in the theater really enjoyed the film. I was not with them on that one, and maybe it's because I'm very sensitive to wokeism, but to me this movie wasn't it. I mean, there could have been a better storyline, a more appropriate storyline for especially the young women in particular who are going to see this movie. And overall, the messaging was a complete miss on what the actual world is like, at least through the lens that I'm looking at it. But I'm sure they're going to make a lot of money from the movie because it's like one of the most popular movies in the year 2023. If you haven't watched the film, fine and good. If you have watched the film, I would really want to hear your thoughts. Join the conversation down there in the comment section and tell me about your thoughts. Goodbye.